Hi, this is Hollywood Breaks with myself, Tim Thompson, and my inside partner, Keith Rauch. This week we're discussing Spielberg's big move with Netflix. We're calling it Saving Private Equity because Spielberg has made a deal with his production company, Amblin Entertainment, for clearly some other reason than his one-time advocacy to save the silver screen. With this move, I'm sure Netflix is also looking for someone to bring an A game because Wall Street Journal recently had reported that out of all the studios and platforms, Netflix scores a big 0 on people that remember their movies after 5 months. So this and many more topics we're going to discuss today. Please enjoy the episode. So what is coming out? Fast and Furious 9. The Quiet Place is already out there.
Quiet Place is already there. In the Heights,
right?
is still in theaters. And then you had My Boyfriend's Bodyguard Part 2.
Oh yeah, that's right. Wait,
which I don't think did very well. Did great, but that might work. That's Ryan Reynolds.
That's our buddy's film, Lionsgate.
Tim. That's Tim. Mr. Delicious.
Yeah, I saw the trailer for it. Oh, it cracked me.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, the first one was supposed to be pretty funny, but it didn't like do gangbusters. Like, so the sequel was a little bit like, really, why do you want to do a sequel? But I guess they all had fun making it, so they want to do another one. But it didn't do so hot. But I think it's still in theaters. So,
well, maybe I'll send my kids to Fast and Furious, and I'll. All right, Mister. I sent you an article because it totally cracked me up. I mean, honestly. Yes. So the article I sent you was about Spielberg making a deal with Netflix, where almost like the genesis of Hollywood Breaks. Was the original article we read where Spielberg was totally just panning any OTT platform and saying it's not real filmmaking, and
it's not a film, it's not a movie, basically was his premise. And then he for a half a second was basically like pushing the Academy to make it a strict thing that it had to show in theaters for a certain amount of time, solely because he wanted to try to make the distinction between a film and a Netflix film. He gave that up after like a week, though.
Yeah, he did. That was like maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah. I think it was about 2 years ago because it was right before the Oscar season of the 2019, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now I guess if you can't beat them, join them. Is that what we're learning here? So his deal.
Here's
by the way.
I mean, here's the thing. I delved a little bit more into details because you can't really go by what the headline the media chooses, because they're going to create the headline that creates the most clickbait. So Spielberg going to Netflix, everyone immediately thinks, oh, he's going to direct Netflix movies. But that's not a guarantee. He may direct a Netflix movie, but the deal is actually with Amblin Partners, which is his production company. He still keeps his film deal with Universal, which he's been on there since the Lew Wasserman days. So way back when. I think he still has the same bungalow from back in those days. So he still has that flexibility. And obviously Universal has Focus. So if he wants to do like more arty house fare, it's more likely that'll go to Focus versus Netflix. But that enables Amblin to have a little bit more of a funding stream. So it's not just Spielberg per se. But and I would say it's probably inevitable that he's going to do a Netflix movie, because much like Martin Scorsese had The Irishman, which was his passion project that every studio said go screw, I'm not making a 3.5-hour movie for 150 million or whatever that budget was. So ultimately maybe Spielberg has one of those films he's been wanting to make that Netflix will say, sure, why not? Yeah. Here's 200 million, go make your movie.
He's probably sitting around smoking cigars with Scorsese, and Scorsese's like, dude, just sign the deal. They'll make whatever movie you want to.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me because Scorsese penned the article in Vanity Fair basically attacking Marvel movies as like popcorn, like not film. They weren't film. They're just amusement park rides, as I guess he kind of referenced them. And now he goes to Netflix. And now Spielberg's going to Netflix. So
turns out if you want a really sweet deal with Netflix, write a scathing review,
them.
which
insult them.
Which might get me to the best segue ever of, if we're going to pan Netflix content, maybe we can get
Exactly.
a pretty good Netflix deal.
Well, you do have a tendency to attack Netflix quality. And
Because
you should know that
it's
as of
like
this week,
Disney. It's like Disney TV. It's like those
it's
cheesy Hannah
it's a movie of the
Montana type.
week.
It's
They're like movies of the week. Movies of the
totally
week.
yes.
So you'll be happy to know that your kind of prestigious company, the Wall Street Journal, this past week published an article essentially with your thesis.
Did they quote me?
They should have. Next time, I think they will. Essentially saying like Netflix is prioritizing quantity over quality. And they had this very fascinating chart, which Richard Rushfield republished in his Ankler.
Keith, I'm just going to tell you something. That's not that big of a breakthrough.
No, it's not. But it's. I think it's the first time it's really been brought up.
Yeah.
Sort of like yes, everyone has had hushed conversations like, oh, it's a Netflix movie, so they just let's see what sticks. But it's the first time that it has really dived into sort of like the process. And there was a chart they had which focused on sort of the buzz that each film has after like 5 months, like movies. And Disney obviously topped the list, and then the other studios were sort of, Warner Brothers was number 2, Sony was number 3, and then Paramount, and then probably forgetting Lionsgate, I think might have been on there. Netflix, zero buzz after 5 months. So
wait, so hold on. So I'm just going to restate what you're saying, because I'm pretty sure that's exactly my experience that I've been trying to get out of my head. So when you're looking for a show,
right,
like Netflix does a really good job. It's one of the first platforms I go to. They push their shows to the front, and sure, why not try it?
Yeah.
Right. Octavia Spencer's in it. I'm going to give it a shot. Uh-huh. But the reality is if you asked me what I watched 5 months ago on Netflix, besides knowing I didn't like it, I couldn't tell you if there was a movie I liked.
You are so getting a Christmas card from Ted Sarandos and Reed Hastings. I can see it. It's going to be nice, big bag of coal. And maybe some other things thrown in there as well.
No, but I could tell you honestly, I could only recall in my mind things I didn't like, except for Stranger Things and House of Cards, which aren't like theatrical in form. They're more episodic.
Yeah, I would say, because this was basically a percentage of films that maintain significant public interest over 5 months. I would be interested to see what the flip side of that would be with TV series, because I would argue they probably do quite well in that regard. I would probably say Netflix and Disney are at the top of that list. But with films, and this was a very film-centric article. It wasn't necessarily talking about some of the other series that they've had successes with. This is very film-based. And I think it's largely because they've spent so much money on film. And their awards budget is like insane, like the amount of money they spend to try to get nominations. They're desperate to win the Best Picture. So, it's interesting to me that it seems that there might be a shift happening here. Like maybe they're realizing that they need to sort of focus a little bit more on the quality, but Matt Belloni, I think is how you say his name, who does What I'm Hearing, which is his new he's a former editor-in-chief of the Hollywood Reporter. He puts out a weekly newsletter called What I'm Hearing, and he had a very, very succinct analysis with this point. He's basically saying, listen, because hours viewing is going to start to drop because the pandemic's coming to an end. Obviously, 2020 was like record-breaking.
Sure.
Because everybody was stuck at home. Now it's going to start to drop because the pandemic's coming to an end. People are going outside. The goals of all these streamers now are going to be to reduce churn and hold on to and grow subscribers, grow the subscription rate. And the only way you're really going to do that is if you have more or less new content pretty much every week. You just have to do it. And that metric, trying to get the quality up, it's not going to be easy because you've got to just churn and churn. And I think Scott Stuber, who's the head of Netflix Film, basically said they're going to release 60 films next year or something ridiculous. You can't do that and still maintain an extreme high level of quality. It's just not possible, because if you have to churn out that many movies, the quality is probably going to suffer a little bit. But it's about the focus now, as I said, is reducing churn, because we don't really know where the consumers, because the pandemic has shuffled everything, we don't know what consumers' sort of maximum number of subscriptions to streaming services they're going to tolerate. Is it 3? Is it 4? Or is it going to be, we'll watch while our favorite show's on there, and then once we binge, we're out. We'll cancel.
So that makes total sense. I feel like the promotions they did at the beginning of the year were just about volume. So they had those, teaser trailer kind of things where they had all their, big stars talking about the films they're going to make on a weekly basis at Netflix. Mm-hmm. So I think they were way ahead of the game, recognizing, oh, wait, when the pandemic's over, viewing hours have to drop. Like people are actually going to go outside and live a life. They're not going to be sitting in front of television for 9 months. So the economics of Netflix says, don't cancel us. That's all they really want, right? Just a monthly fee or whatever. So they figure, well, if we produce a movie of the week every single week, at least people will not cancel us, because for their $7 a week or whatever, they're getting a film with a Hollywood star in it. It's not a Hollywood quality film, but a film with a Hollywood star in it.
Yeah, and I think that's that. I mean, they had an edge when the pandemic started because they had so many films and shows already in the can. So they were able to slowly, in posts, not in the can, and they were able to slowly roll them out while all the other streamers were like, we don't have anything. So they obviously had an edge in that regard, and it's largely because they do that. They just churn it like, let's go. Now, from a marketing standpoint, because you and I are both content marketers, that's sucks. It's we've had Cami Sargent, who said that was the toughest part for her. It was because when you're on a film, you put your blood, sweat, and tears into figuring out the best way to reach an audience, and you have a trailer that pops on the service for a week. You get a little tile, boom, onto the next one. Whereas at the studio, it's at least 3 trailers. You've got to craft a digital campaign. You've got to craft a somewhat of a TV campaign. You've got out of home, billboards, in theaters. It's all inclusive. But with Netflix, it's okay, one and done. We're out the door.
Even, we haven't talked about your movie posters in a while, but just to recognize that there is also an art form to the marketing of Hollywood.
Yes.
I mean, and that's people's careers. They specifically do that. They make things like movie posters and trailers. They tell the film story very differently in 30 seconds or 2 minutes. And it's really, it's a beautiful art form. It is. I remember when Apple back in the day just used to apple.com/trailers, and they just showed movie trailers because it was its own kind of art form.
Joe Blow was one of the best places to go to just watch new trailers. Cause that's where and it was when I was working in development at New Line, that was the assistants, we just pass around trailers all day. They're oh, you got to check this out. Oh, this is great. You got to check the queue out on this one. La, 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 la. And it's just it is an art form. And it's funny because when I was working here at that company in Philadelphia, who shall remain nameless, they all thought, especially
not Comcast. It's not
Comcast.
It's not the Comcast one.
No. The editors were very talented. Don't get me wrong, but they all thought they could easily just cut a trailer. And I'm guys, there's a very specific skill set to this. You guys are used to cutting commercials. This is not the same skill set. It's a very specific set. You have to have perfect timing with a cue. You have to be able to, basically take a 2-hour movie and squeeze it into 2 minutes and make it engaging enough that someone's going to want to say, oh, I want to see that. Mm-hmm. It's different from I want to see that to oh yeah, maybe I'll buy that. It's not, it's difficult to explain until you actually sit in a bay with an editor, a music supervisor, a copywriter, and you're actually all working together to put together a piece that is going to present this movie in a way that not only respects the filmmaker's vision, but at the same time is appealing enough to the audience to make them want to come and buy a ticket.
Yeah, if you remember my big, bold move of breaking protocol and outsourcing the
Yes,
segments we were
that
doing.
went over like gangbusters.
Yeah, but to say like, wait a second, a movie trailer company, this needs to be handed to a movie trailer company
Yeah.
or movie trailer editors that can know how to tell the storyline. And the timeline that we had, we're doing an end of year
End of
compilation.
year like rewards type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's important to recognize that, and I learned that myself back when I was at Imaginary Forces. We were making, amazing commercial work, opening credits for films, contributing awesome graphics to it. But when we'd go to Sony and they'd try to give us a trailer, we really struggled with just a version one kind
Yeah.
of edit. We were more like cinematic storytellers or segment storytellers, and I didn't understand that mojo until I went to Trailer Park. And then once I got at Trailer Park, I just realized like, oh, this is just so different. Nothing. It starts in a different place. It's financed differently. It's the way people interface with it is totally different. And those trailer editors, they really have to know what that 2 minutes feels like before they dive into it. So they're watching 4 or 5 hours worth of content.
Oh yeah, and a lot of the time,
2 minutes.
A lot of times you're pulling from dailies. We would often, when I was at Fox, because Tony Sella was very big at crafting a very distinct trailer versus what the movie necessarily had. So he would like, have us send all the dailies to the vendor. So they would have to break down all the dailies, every single shot. And when you're dealing with like a Scott Brothers film, like Tony Scott, God rest his soul, shot an enormous amount of footage. Like you would see like a day of shooting for a movie for him was like an entire shelf of tapes because he just shoots so much. And we would have to send that all to the vendors because Tony wanted it all there, because you have to be able to craft. And then they have to go through all of that and figure out how that can potentially kind of work together and how the flow and like, one shot, how one, character flying off screen cuts to another character coming from the same direction. I mean, it really is such an art form. And my old boss, he said it once that I often didn't get it when he said it because I just started there. He said, most editors are like musicians. They're musicians on the side. And I'm like, really? That doesn't mean, all you do is push buttons. And it's like, well, when you think about it, it's all about keeping time and the beat and, basically composing a piece and being able to keep things to time and picking the right cue and all that. It's very sort of almost, it has sort of a very similar skill set to it.
Yeah. And it's layers, like it has parts.
Yeah.
And that's some of it too. It's not just, the film or the footage, the voice, and maybe a soundtrack, which that's what films have to work with. But you add sound effect and graphic and voiceover, and and you can halfway through a trailer, you can switch songs immediately and get a different moment, and you create its own. The arc of the trailer has its own bridge and it has its own conclusion, and it's totally brilliant. That's what I gotta say. Like when I hear the moves of like what Disney did, and just basically saying content, here's content distribution, we're going to put things in context, and then the middle of it's going to be marketing. We're not going to take, and these are my words, but my concern is like they're not going to take any thought to the type of content it is. They're only going to basically worry about the distribution channels. And that art form, that marketing art form of movie poster, trailer, teaser, whatever, is just turning into nothing. So Disney doing something like that. I think Paramount Plus might be doing something like that. Like they're really just like centralizing these decision making, and I think we're going to miss some of that awesome nuance.
Well, yeah, I mean, Paramount basically announced a restructuring of their Paramount Plus division, and it's very similar in terms of you have like one division. You have George Cheeks, who's the gentleman who came over from NBCU, who's sort of like, he's going to be the chief content officer for like news and sports for Paramount Plus. Jim Giannopoulos is going to oversee Paramount Movies. Bruce Gilmore, I guess, who's president of music at sort of like working with MTV. He's going to sort of look at ways to leverage Viacom's global IP. And then you have Chris McCarthy, who's the head of MTV. He's actually the head of MTV. He's going to focus more on sort of unscripted and animation. And then you've got David Nevins from Showtime and Nicole Clemens from Paramount TV, who are going to oversee sort of like the scripted series. and it's really content focused because that's really what it's about. So they're taking.
It sounds like they basically just said the type of content is what's going to determine the leadership, right? They're basically dividing into content, and then not distribution is no longer the kind of business.
Well, I've heard rumblings that they're going to potentially go that route and build like a separate distribution division, much like Disney did with Kareem Daniel. And that may eventually come to pass because it seems like that would make sense, but they've already determined this is Paramount Plus. Like, so with Disney, it's like you've got, for example, the studio that oversees Marvel, Pixar, Lucasfilm. They make movies and it's not necessarily guaranteed going to be on a theatrical track. And that's going to be based mainly on what Kareem Daniel's data tells him, whether or not the movie makes the most sense to be in the theaters versus on Disney Plus. Now, if you look at what Paramount's doing, or Viacom, I should say, they're very specific. These people are in Paramount Plus. So Jim Giannopoulos, for example, is going to oversee movies for Paramount Plus, but he's still going to make Paramount movies. So it's entirely possible that movies that are made for Paramount could end up on Paramount Plus, but that I think they're going to be two very distinct channels. So they're going to, a movie's going to be greenlit for Paramount Plus. A movie's going to be greenlit for theatrical, which I think is a smart play because to the talent around town and in Hollywood in general, it's saying, if we commit to theatrical, you're going to get a theatrical release.
Yeah, they're basically competing with Warner Brothers and their inability to make it.
Yes, exactly. They're like the polar opposite. So I give Jim, again, I said this a few weeks ago, I give Jim Giannopoulos a lot of credit for holding firm on Quiet Place, because I'm sure he was getting a lot of pressure from on high to put that on Paramount Plus because they needed something to launch it. That would have been a perfect thing. But Jim's like, no, this is a theatrical release. And the fact that he stood his ground, I think, bought him a lot of credit with the town, because everyone's going to be like, see, if Jim commits to a theatrical release, it's going to stay theatrical. Now, the flip side of that, playing devil's advocate, would be if you commit to a theatrical and it ends up on Paramount Plus, that's going to communicate to the broader community that the movie's shit.
It's like straight to video kind of a.
Yeah, it's like direct to DVD. So it's sort of like, that's a little bit of a difficult bridge to hoe, but again, it's showcasing that they are in fact committed to theatrical. Whereas, as you pointed out, Toby Emmerich and his team at Warner Brothers has a little bit of a heavier lift now because they just went whoop, and now the town's like, and then you've got like I said 2 weeks ago, Brian Lord came out and said they have a lot more work to do, and that's not what you want to really hear from the head of CAA. So, I think I think everyone's experimenting right now. And we'll see how this all plays out. But I think that's a smart move on Viacom's part to sort of give we're committed to the theatrical experience. If we commit to it, that's where it's going to go. It's not going to be shuffled down Paramount Plus because some guy in the data department tells me we'll make X, Y, and Z. So, and one more thing I do want to talk about. Sorry.
Oh yeah, go for it. Yeah.
So I want to bring up this because it just popped into my head. I know we didn't run through this in the pre-show, but bonus for everyone. So Luca came out this past weekend, and it's interesting. I was talking to our old Hollywood Breaker friend, Robin Geisen, who will be coming on next month for all of you Robin Geisen fans. And she and I were talking a lot about how we're shocked that Pixar didn't release it in theaters, because my wife went to a book we have a neighborhood book reading where like the police chief comes. Yesterday was the mailman. That's the kind of town we live in. It's really nice.
Pretty cool.
And she was talking to a lot of the mothers there, and they were all raving about Luca, what a great movie it was. And it's like, Robin was like, I haven't seen it, so I'm totally speaking from secondhand information, but I trust Robin's sort of opinion. And she said, this is a movie you want to see in theaters because it's so beautiful and gorgeous, and it shoots the Italian Riviera. And so I'm wondering where the decision was made to not release that in theaters. I'm curious.
So I did see Luca.
Oh,
and what a
great segue.
Yeah, perfect. What I do in my backyard is I have a big screen and a projector. So we basically, it was
nice.
80 degrees outside. We had friends over, and we got up the screen, got out my sound system, and played it outside. It's quasi like
Nice.
drive-in theater-ish is what we
Yeah.
do. Because I felt like, oh wait, it's a Pixar movie. I'm
Yeah.
kind of a fan of Pixar movies. Um, I'll say on the tough side, it's missing a little bit of Lasseter love. It's like there's something that kind of a little bit of spice that used to exist. But great film. I'm with everyone, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was thinking like I might actually be right about this, where Disney is basically playing against the theaters for a little bit, with the thought that they would go into an acquisition deal. Like they kind of don't want to feed a target that later on they're going to want to acquire. So you don't go like, well, I'm not going to make AMC look better or Pacific Theaters look better and give them
buy them.
sales. I'm going to basically not supply them for a while,
hold
them back, and then you buy them at.
See,
because why would a Disney in the future want to get into the distribution game? They're so, the El Capitan experience is so fun. Why wouldn't they think, well, let's do this everywhere? But they're like, wait, we can buy it for a pretty penny. So
that's definitely a possibility. I never thought of that. Another theory I had was that they are guessing, and they might have research that shows this, that families are not necessarily comfortable going to the theaters yet because kids still have to mask. So there's a lot of, my kids actually are starting to push back. They're 7 and 5, and they're like, it's not fair. You guys don't have to wear masks anymore, and we do. And so I think I think maybe a lot of parents are probably starting to deal with that a little bit more. And you don't really have a choice when you go to a theater because it's like young kids still have to mask. So, I don't know.
Don't we all kind of know, like, when the lights are off, no one's patrolling
True.
the theater.
Fair point. That's a fair point. But that was part of my thinking. It was like they maybe have research that says families aren't comfortable going back to theater. And right now, a lot of kids are home for summer break. Everybody wants to be outside because we've all been shuttered in for like 15 months. So maybe that sort of factored into the decision. It's just interesting to me.
You're
because,
probably right. I'm probably scheming way too much.
No, I honestly,
I don't see anything Disney going into the theaters. I kept thinking like, when was the last time I was thinking of a Disney film in the theater? I'm like,
well, that's the big question. That's what everyone's asking. Like, when is this going to end? Bob Chapek keeps saying, Bob II keeps saying, this is temporary. The pandemic's still going. We're committed to theatrical. We're not going to necessarily throw everything on Disney Plus day and date. I don't know if anyone's convinced that that's the case, because we don't have any data showing how much, for example, Cruella, how well it did on premium access. We don't know. We don't know the numbers. We also don't know because Luca was free and doesn't have the premium access. So all you got to have is a Disney Plus subscription. Did that drive subs? Did the subs go up? Like we don't know any of this, so we can't ascertain what is actually what their decision-making process is happening. And this is a lot of what Kareem Daniels' group is supposed to sort of figure out. And that's the big question right now, is whether or not they have data that says families aren't willing to come to the theaters yet, so why not just throw it out on Disney Plus? We'll get more subs, reduce churn. The other thing is Disney Plus doesn't have a lot of original, necessarily made specifically for Disney Plus movies. They have series.
It's the series,
obviously,
yeah,
but they don't have movies. So that may be somewhat playing into this game, because you've got, again, Paramount Plus, you've got HBO Max throwing out all their movies. So they may be looking at the broader landscape and trying to figure out a way to, again, the goal is reduce churn, increase subs. This is one way to keep doing that. So
yeah, and I think that some of the premium releases that Disney was trying to do, I don't think it's playing out the way that they wanted to. Like to pay a little bit extra when you could just wait 2 weeks. So they might be just realizing, well, let's just release some film straight to Plus. But I don't like the Pixar movie. Like, Pixar has a great reputation. And they
have a brand. Disney's the only studio that has the brands, really. I'll be interested to see what happens with Black Widow. I think that's going to be the first real test of whether and what the point is where people are willing to actually pay to go back to the theater. Because Black Widow is a Marvel property. She's a relatively popular character. She's not one of the sort of downstream characters that, they're starting to dig into.
We're going to see this in the theater. This is
it's a Marvel movie. This is the kind of movie that's going to drag people out of their homes. But they can also see it at home. And in that, I think, there's another article I read where the author sort of threw out this idea, which isn't necessarily a bad idea, where you get a bunch of like what you did. You get a bunch of family and friends together to come over your house. You pay the $30. Everybody's sitting in their comfort of a nice house with their own popcorn and drinks and what have you, and you watch the movie. If you're a family, if you're like 3 or 4 families on a block, why wouldn't you do that and spend $30 amongst the 4 or 5 of you versus spending $100 each to go to a theater?
Yeah.
So we don't know that could be what especially because of summer, and
some theaters still have the private viewing parties too. So they're
cutting back on that. They're pulling back on that.
It's bumming me out because I'm going to try and get one more of those in before this whole. It's like $200 and you can get like 20 people in there or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They're cutting back on that for probably the exact reason. They want people to go pay and go see movies, not see like first run movies, not pay to run some movie that they brought with them.
Yeah, I'll be curious. I again, like maybe I'm scheming a little more than people, but I swear, like Disney, unlike Universal, when they first had that issue with AMC and then they backed away, Disney's been really holding back on that theatrical stuff. And I think, from almost the first episode, the Paramount decree going away, there are some big players somewhere that hired enough lawyers to reverse that Paramount decree. So there's a big plan somewhere. This is people buying up the ground somewhere on the West Coast before it's all gentrified. They slowly buy it, right? Then when the time comes, it was very easy for them. So I don't think we've seen that thing play itself out yet.
I would speculate that I think Comcast might have a game in this as well, because there was a huge article on Brian Roberts in the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was yesterday or Thursday, and no comment from him, but a lot of it was like, he's on the hunt. He's got money. He knows he wants to scale. Peacock needs to get a boost somewhere. And whether or not it's Viacom, CBS, whether Max play for them, it's entirely possible. I don't know if Sherry is ready to let go after the battle that she joined to wrestle that company back into her control. So I don't know. But if that's necessarily the way they're going to go, but that's also a possibility.
Yeah.
He's a savvy deal maker. Obviously, he was able to do with what AT&T was unable to do by marrying creation and distribution, content creation and distribution in a way that currently is working for them, whereas AT&T flubbed it completely. So it'll be interesting to see if maybe they're the player. We talk a lot about Disney, but we forget Comcast also owns Universal Studios. They're revamping their entire park in Florida. So they know how to do customer experiences. Yeah. So
and people are cutting cable, so they need to they've
got their X1 box, the Flex box or whatever it is. They're also supposed, another interesting aspect of the article was they floated the idea that they might want to buy Roku and have
that would be
a box that's actually formatted and Peacock, much like, if you buy an Amazon Fire, Amazon Prime's like, boop, in your face. Peacock could potentially be in your face.
Sure. And then they have a distribution channel for their content, like their own OTT straight to.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how this all, again, Comcast has got some dough. And Brian Roberts is not one to just sit back and be like, I'm done. So I wouldn't be surprised if they're making some moves behind the scenes as well, similar to Disney, that they might acquire a theater or two to really turn it into.
You're in Philadelphia. Why don't you go get Brian Roberts to join us on our podcast? Just grab your camera.
Let me write that down.
Okay, yeah. All right, my friend. I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go watch some F9 trailers to see if I'm gonna go to the movies this weekend and watch that.
It looks bonkers, ridiculous. I've had debates about the Fast Furious franchise. There are people who are my age who swear by it because they love, and this is obviously accurate because it's done so well since number 3. They've rebooted it. The absurdity of it. It's the absolute absurdity of the films that they just absolutely love.
Yeah.
And, everyone who doesn't love to hear Vin Diesel talk about Paul Walker for the 50th time. But
well, I always feel like when you watch those movies, you go, who thought of this? Like, this doesn't even make any sense of how that car can whatever. You're like, this is
you gotta hang your logic police badge up.
This is my theory behind Fast and Furious. It's Matchbox cars, or it's Hot Wheels. You know how when we used to go like this, and then we'd go.
Oh, the little track.
That's all it is.
Yeah, and then
like it's just us with our hand, like it's super Evel Knievel style. I can jump over everything. That's how they direct the movie. They're like, let's get a 4-year-old and a bunch of Hot Wheels, and whatever that kid does, we're gonna make it.
We're gonna mimic it on film. Oh my God, it's brilliant. I love it.
That's my theory.
That's a great theory.
Well, good to see you this week. Good to have you. And I look forward to having Robin back. Blessings to him.
We got some other guests in the mix, but in classic Hollywood style, I can't reveal that just
Brian
yet.
Roberts. We know.
Brian Roberts. I'll make a play for Brian Roberts. Brian Roberts, if you're listening, I'm in Philadelphia. I can come right there. It'd be easy.
Just bring your laptop.
Peasy. I'll just hap onto SEPTA.
Yeah.
Right down to.
You got a brand new laptop, Keith. Show it off to Brian. Like, bro,
know.
This is my brand new one. Look at this.
A brand new one. Look, I've got X1 on here. I know I can show them. I know how to use X1. Even though I don't have it, I know how to use it.
That's horrible. All right, have a good weekend. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too.